In 1951, a political activist named Isaiah C. Kenen began building a network in Washington. He wasn't a senator. He wasn't a cabinet secretary. He wasn't a billionaire. Most Americans had never heard his name. Yet the organization he helped create would eventually become one of the most influential advocacy groups in American politics. Today, supporters describe it as a model of democratic participation and one of the most effective examples of citizen advocacy in the United States. Critics describe it as a symbol of concentrated political influence and an example of how organized lobbying can shape foreign policy for generations. The organization is known today as the American-Israel Public Affairs Committee. For simplicity, we'll refer to it as AIPAC. Its history is not merely the story of Israel's relationship with the United States. It is also the story of how influence is built, maintained, and expanded within the American political system. More than 70 years after its founding, people continue to debate its role, its methods, and its impact, to understand why it helps to start at the beginning. When Israel was established in 1948, its future was far from certain. The new nation faced military threats from neighboring states, economic instability, and questions about whether it could survive its first decade. Supporters of Israel understood that military strength alone would not determine the country's future. International recognition, economic assistance, diplomatic support, and military aid would also matter. Much of that support would depend on decisions made in Washington. Isaiah Kenen understood this. A former journalist and political activist, Kenen believed that long-term support for Israel would require more than public sympathy. It would require a permanent political infrastructure capable of educating lawmakers, mobilizing supporters, and influencing policy debates regardless of which political party held power. In 1951, Kenen established the American Zionist Committee for Public Affairs. The organization would evolve over time and eventually become known as the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. At the time, there was little indication that the organization would become a major force in American politics. It had no massive headquarters, no national media profile, no multi-million-dollar budget. What it did have was a strategy. Kenen focused on Congress. He understood that presidents come and go, but congressional support can shape foreign policy for decades. Rather than organizing large public demonstrations, he concentrated on building relationships with lawmakers and creating networks of supporters who could contact their representatives when legislation affecting Israel appeared. Today, such tactics are commonplace. In the 1950s, they were remarkably effective. The organization's early years were not free from controversy. During the 1960s, federal officials examined whether certain organizations connected to pro-Israel advocacy should register under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, commonly known as FAR. Much of that scrutiny centered on the American Zionist Council, an umbrella organization that coordinated activities among several pro-Israel groups. Supporters argued that American citizens have a constitutional right to advocate for policies they support. Critics argued that organizations closely connected to foreign interests should face additional transparency requirements. The debate never fully disappeared. Instead, it became part of a broader argument that would follow AIPAC throughout its history. Where is the line between legitimate advocacy and excessive influence? The answer would become even more controversial in the decades ahead. By the mid-1960s, events in the Middle East were about to transform both Israel's position in the world and the influence of organizations advocating on its behalf. The turning point arrived in 1967.